Freud analyzes the clinical structure of paraphrenia, distinguishing three groups of symptoms: residual normal functioning, the active disease process involving libido withdrawal and megalomania, and restorative attempts, where libido reattaches to objects, producing symptoms resembling hysteria or obsessional neurosis. I shall try here to penetrate a little further into the mechanism of paraphrenia, and shall bring together those views which already seem to me to deserve consideration. The difference between paraphrenic affections and the transference neuroses appears to me to lie in the circumstance that, in the former, the libido that is liberated by frustration does not remain attached to objects in fantasy, but withdraws onto the ego. Megalomania would accordingly correspond to the psychical mastering of this latter amount of libido, and would thus be the counterpart of the introversion onto fantasies that is found in the transference neuroses. A failure of this psychical function gives rise to the hypochondria of paraphrenia, and this is homologous to the anxiety of the transference neuroses. We know that this anxiety can be resolved by further psychical working over, that is to say, by conversion, reaction formation, or the construction of protections, phobias. The corresponding process in paraphrenics is an attempt at restoration, to which the striking manifestations of the disease are due. Since paraphrenia frequently, if not usually, brings about only a partial detachment of the libido from objects, we can distinguish three groups of phenomena in the clinical picture: those representing what remains of a normal state or of neurosis, residual phenomena; those representing the morbid process, detachment of libido from its objects, and further, megalomania, hypochondria, affective disturbance, and every kind of regression; and those representing restoration, in which the libido is once more attached to objects, after the manner of a hysteria, in dementia praecox or paraphrenia proper, or of an obsessional neurosis, in paranoia. This fresh libidinal cathexis differs from the primary one in that it starts from another level and under other conditions. The difference between the transference neuroses brought about in the case of this fresh kind of libidinal cathexis and the corresponding formations where the ego is normal should be able to afford us the deepest insight into the structure of our mental apparatus. A third way in which we may approach the study of narcissism is by observing the erotic life of human beings with its many kinds of differentiation in man and woman. Just as object libido at first concealed ego libido from our observation, so too in connection with the object choice of infants and of growing children, what we first noticed was that they derived their sexual objects from their experiences of satisfaction. The first autoerotic sexual satisfactions are experienced in connection with vital functions which serve the purpose of self-preservation. The sexual instincts are at the outset attached to the satisfaction of the ego instincts. Only later do they become independent of these, and even then we have an indication of that original attachment in the fact that the persons who are concerned with a child's feeding, care, and protection become his earliest sexual objects. That is to say, in the first instance, his mother or a substitute for her. Side by side, however, with this type and source of object choice, which may be called the anaclitic or attachment type, psychoanalytic research has revealed a second type, which we were not prepared for finding. We have discovered, especially clearly in people whose libidinal development has suffered some disturbance, such as perverts and homosexuals, that in their later choice of love objects, they have taken as a model not their mother, but their own selves. They are plainly seeking themselves as a love object, and are exhibiting a type of object choice which must be termed narcissistic. In this observation, we have the strongest of the reasons which have led us to adopt the hypothesis of narcissism. We have not concluded that human beings are divided into two sharply differentiated groups, as according to their object choice conforms to the anaclitic or to the narcissistic type. We assume rather that both kinds of object choice are open to each individual, though he may show a preference for one or the other. We say that a human being has originally two sexual objects, himself and the woman who nurses him, and in doing so we are postulating a primary narcissism in everyone, which may in some cases manifest itself in a dominating fashion in his object choice. A comparison of the male and female sexes then shows that there are fundamental differences between them in respect of their type of object choice, although these differences are of course not universal. Complete object love of the attachment type is, properly speaking, characteristic of the male. It displays a marked sexual overvaluation which is doubtless derived from the child's original narcissism and thus corresponds to a transference of that narcissism to the sexual object. This sexual overvaluation is the origin of the peculiar state of being in love, a state suggestive of a neurotic compulsion, which is thus traceable to an impoverishment of the ego as regards libido in favor of the love object.